The Constitution of Canada, 1867. Executive Power. Article 9. The executive government and authority of and over Canada is hereby declared to continue to be vested in the Queen. An executive officer is generally a person responsible for running an organization, although the exact nature of the role varies depending on the organization. Definition of Chief Executive Officer, CEO. The highest ranking executive in a company, whose main responsibilities include developing and implementing high-level strategies, making major corporate decisions, managing the overall operations and resources of a company, and acting as the main point of communication between the board of directors and the corporate operations. The CEO will often have a position on the board, and in some cases, even the chair. In the Constitution Act of Canada, Article 9, it starts to describe the powers, the authority. Even though we know they are de facto, it starts to describe them, what will be in operation here in Canada. And it says that the executive power. Now notice that word. They used the term executive. They could have used any other term, analogy. There's many terminologies to describe what Canada would be. Nevertheless, they chose to use the word executive power. And that's the designation that they use. So to use that word executive is demonstrating a corporate function. Corporation, a company. This is a stock exchange form. It's called Form 18K. If you see, it says Canada, and it says Canada on the stock exchange market. This is to show us that Canada is indeed considered a corporation, and as such is traded on the stock market. Most of us are aware that Canada is indeed considered a corporation. That is why if you look on the American stock market, you'll find Canada is traded on the stock market. It has a representation there, because indeed it is considered a corporation. Now, the executive power, it says that it is resting with the Governor General. The Governor General. It's the Queen who has given the Governor General these executive powers, because ultimately all powers, executive powers of Canada, rest with the Queen. But she has imparted them to the Governor General and the Deputy Generals of the province. Application of provisions referring to Governor General, Article 10. The provisions of this Act referring to the Governor General extend and apply to the Governor General for the time being of Canada, or other, the Chief Executive Officer and Administrator for the time being, carrying on the Government of Canada on behalf and in the name of the Queen, by whatever title he is designated. The Constitution Act of Canada, Article 14. It shall be lawful for the Queen, if Her Majesty thinks fit, to authorize the Governor General from time to time to appoint any person or persons jointly or severally to be his deputy or deputies within any part or parts of Canada. In the Constitution Act, it says it will be lawful for the Queen to give these executive powers to the Governor General of Canada. And then it goes on to say all these executive powers and the nature of these powers that the Governor General has, he can pass them on or give them off in a limited capacity to his deputy Governor Generals, which he appoints. He appoints. So the Queen appoints the Governor General, and then the Governor General appoints Deputy Generals. So this is all a controlled position. The executive power of Canada, where the real power structure comes from, and where the real decisions are made, it is very controlled. Because the Queen has a Privy Council, and that Queen and the Privy Council controls the Governor General, and the Governor General controls his Deputy Generals, and appoints them. So all this is very tightly controlled. In the Constitution Act of Canada, it says that there shall be one Parliament, and then it states the positions of this Parliament. It says that The Queen will be the head of the Parliament. Then there will be an upper house titled the Senate. And then there will be the House of Commons. House of Commons. Now look at that word commons. That's referring to the lay people, the common people. If you go back to the old days in English, when the kings and the queens ruled, which they still do, only now in deception, they used to have common folk, the lay people, the poorer people, not the rich. Well, that's what they're saying, the House of the Common Folk, who are represented by the so-called democracy, the government of Canada. Harper may suspend Parliament. Bid by Harper to avoid confidence vote could come as early as Wednesday. This was December 3rd, 2008. Back in December 2008, when the Conservative Party was suffering and they were having troubles politically, they wanted to prorogue Parliament. They wanted to suspend Parliament. Now, if you go and check all or any articles that were released back then, most of them will say that Harper wanted to suspend Parliament, yet he had to ask the Governor General. Now they're going to qualify that and say, well, it was just a ritual and it doesn't really matter. But no, that's not the truth, because in law, the Governor General has all the executive powers of Canada, and they've been granted to him or her by the Queen. And Harper only represents the common people, us commoners. Therefore, when he wanted to suspend government, he had to ask the Governor General for permission. Now that notes who's sitting in the position of authority. It's not Harper. Harper had to ask the Governor General, and the Governor General said yes. So the authority came through the channel of the Governor General, and not Harper. Otherwise, Harper could have just suspended it, boom, and he would have proven that he had the authority. So it just shows us clearly the operation of government that's going on here in Canada. That is indeed the Queen, who owns and has all executive powers here in Canada. She transfers them in a limited way to the Governor General, who then retransfers them to the Deputy Generals of the provinces. But throughout all, the Governor General remains with executive power. We're led to believe that Canada is a country, first and foremost. However, when you study the laws, you'll see that Canada isn't a country, it's actually a corporation. It's set up in a corporate structure. Now, to further this deception, they're going to tell us that, well, Canada operates under democracy. And I hope you watched my video here at YouTube called about Canada, the government, not for the people. It'll show you exactly what's going on. Nevertheless, they say it's democracy, but the executive power of Canada, the controlling power that's being exercised, rests with the Queen and the Governor General, not with the political parties that we vote into power. Now, a Canadian citizen, when you say that, that's what you are. You're a subject. You're one who owes allegiance to the Queen, to all this. And she's controlling you through her executive power. So if Canada is a corporation, and the Queen is the head of all power, and she's given it to the Governor General, and it is executive power, therefore you as a subject, or one who owes allegiance, they could be saying that you owe allegiance in a corporate manner. That you're part of this corporation. Now yes, it does work in that way, that the government can be recognized as a corporation, but apart from that, they're also recognized as a government, outside of being a corporation. In any way, your freedom still exists. You're still allowed to take your rights and freedoms that are there for you. So, the executive power is not of the people. It's very tightly controlled, and Canada is very tightly controlled. And your place in Canada is very tightly controlled. Canada does indeed have a corporate structure, a corporate nature. The way Canada is formed, you can see that in operation here, within the higher-ups, there's a corporate operation going on. However, it is not the only structure or only operation that is going on here in Canada. It's not the only nature of the government being corporate. There's other operations of law that are going on within the government that has nothing to do with corporate structure. Man and woman, we do have rights and freedoms that are apart from the commercial system, that have nothing to do with a corporate nature or a corporate structure. And those rights and freedoms are clearly expressed in the covenants that I've been sharing here at YouTube. So rather than going after the government on the corporate nature and trying to battle them and outsmart them in court, well, you're the administrator of my patrimony and you're this and you're that, you don't need to bother to do all this. Because that commercial system is exactly what we don't want to be a part of. Because that's the one that says you have to buy a house. And that's the one that says you have to take a mortgage and pay 2 to 3 times the value of that house in order to exercise your right to a house. And we know, hopefully now, that the other rights and freedoms, well, we are entitled to a living. Entitled. So apart from all this corporate structure, not having to learn it, not having to get into it, or understand it, because it doesn't impact you as a man or woman, unless you choose to let it. When you say that I'm seeking relief from being recognized as a legal person, as a subject of Her Majesty, as a citizen who's under obligation, whose rights have been stripped from me, you're not talking about anything that has to do with a corporation. You're talking about you as a human, as a man and woman, expressing their fundamental rights, their intrinsic inalienable rights. And to go to the government, there's no need to go to and approach them in a commercial capacity. You approach them in a covenant capacity, saying there's a legal obligation, you signed onto these covenants, you're a signatory, and my rights that I realize I have now have been stripped away from me. And there's an obligation through the law for you to supply these rights for me. That's why you see in the charters, and everyone in Canada, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, you see everyone, you see citizen, you see person, because these are 3 different designations in law, 3 different, if you will, freedoms or operations that are afforded to men and women, but you need to understand how to start using them. And that's why everyone has the right to habeas corpus, to be brought before a judge, to determine the jurisdiction, because everyone is not entitled to be held in servitude, and everyone is not entitled to be recognized with the government. That's a choice you have, and it's clearly expressed.